Welcome to Rooted and Unwavering, a podcast and radio show which features leaders from all walks of life in conversations about courageous connectedness. How do we stay connected to our best selves, especially when we are challenged? What becomes possible when we truly stay committed to our own and others' greatness, also when we don't feel it? Join host Hylke Faber, transformational coach, facilitator, and award-winning author of Taming Your Crocodiles, and his guests as they explore leadership greatness in today's episode of Rooted and Unwavering.
And welcome to Rooted and Unwavering, where we help leaders connect more deeply to their innate potential. I'm your host, Hylke Faber, and I'm here today delighted to be with Amy Elizabeth Fox, CEO and co-founder of Mobius, the executive leadership firm. Amy, how are you today?
Delighted to be with you, Hylke, and to have this conversation. Really feel very joyful coming in.
Same here. I feel like that's meeting an old friend that I've not met many times. So it's funny.
Exactly so.
Yeah. So before we go into the conversation with Amy, as we've done in all these now 70 podcasts so far on this topic, Rooted and Unwavering, and just a brief grounding in why we have these podcasts so that we can listen from that perspective. Rootedness to me is a very personal journey, which is endless. And to me, life teaches me and work teaches me every day new ways in which I'm not rooted yet, and in which way I can help myself to get more and more rooted. What I was thinking this morning was about this beautiful quote by Michelangelo when he was asked, how did you make that beautiful statue of later called David? And he said, I saw an angel in the stone and I carved to set it free. And the word freedom is what resonates with me today. When I notice in my own mind, when I'm dealing with a problem, and problems come. There were some problems last few days that came up in my life. And my mind still contracts, still creates a prison of anxiety, of depression, of anger, of trying to figure out, of obsession and control. And mind keeps doing that. And I'm 54. I've given up on the idea that that's going to stop. Seems to be like what this blender does between my ears. And yet, there's also the freedom of being able to observe it, being able to let go, and then stand in awe for the great portal of the infinite that starts to inspire with wisdom and great perspective. Like that waking up in the morning, you think, yes, that. So as we listen to Amy today, I'd love to hear from her and with you from her about her journey, uncarving the angel and the freedom that she's been helping others with, because she is not doing this journey by herself. I knew of Amy many years, probably a decade or more. She is an icon in the industry that I work in coaching and leadership development. So it's an honor from that perspective also to sit with her. She's established a group of people called Mobius Executive Leadership. It's a leadership transformation firm that is global. For the last 20 years, he served as a leadership and culture change advisors to eminent professional services firms and Fortune 500 companies, and has facilitated immersive executive development programs for senior leaders. Also this year, I'm so delighted that she put pen to paper in a book that she co-authored with Nicholas Yanni, which is called Leading in Chaos. She's considered an expert, Amy is, in vertical development. We'll learn more about what that is, and trauma-informed work organizations. And I'm just delighted to sit with you today, Amy, and to hear from you. The first time we actually met was about 2 seasons ago. I think it was the fall of last year. And I was struck by the ease, the genuineness, and the generosity. So welcome, Amy, and tell us about this first question that we're always asking. What have you learned about connectedness in your life and leadership?
Well, what a generous and kind of exquisite introduction that is, Hylke. And in some ways, it leads me to say that one of the first things I've learned about connection is the degree to which you're willing to, or one is willing to share the interiority of your heart, including what you just did, the things that you struggle with, the things that are hard for you, the things that maybe are normally held more private, that if one is willing to unveil and share that content and vulnerability, I guess, it draws people closer, it invites people to walk with you, and it universalizes, exactly as you just did, the human experience, which for everybody is a combination, I think, of awe and wonder and fragility and terror. So that would be the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say, since you linked connectedness and leadership, is my experience of founding and leading a firm is that commerce is deeply linked to the quality and nature of the relationships that you build. Mobius has a very non-ordinary format in the sense that we have very, very few full-time employees that are practitioners, and we have a global network of coaches and facilitators and expressive artists that we work with. And when I first started the firm, some very well-meaning senior strategy consultants said to me, you can't build a firm like this. You're investing incredible amounts of energy and resource in professional development for people who don't work for you, and they're going to leave in a year, and that it's all going to be wasted. I mean, and literally the most cynical of them said, what are you going to do? Love everybody into staying? And I said, yes, I am. And in fact, the average tenure of a Mobius practitioner is more than 15 years out of our 21. And people did stay and entwine their lives personally and professionally. We really became a global, thriving community that heals together, that celebrates together, that grieves together. And it's been fascinating to watch the magnetism of that and the inspiration that clients get from that. I often say that the intimacy and love between us as practitioners is the field of alchemy and healing that they walk into, and that is the magic ingredient in the transformational process. So I guess that's what I would say about connectedness and leadership, at least to start.
Beautiful, beautiful. I want to come back to those words that you start off with, this sense of awe, wonder, and then also fragility and terror. These are big words. So I'd love to know a bit more about Amy Elizabeth Fox. I want to know more about your journey, because not everyone starts such a company or gets on this path and commits to it. So tell us about your journey into connecting with your own connectedness with Amy. Tell us about that journey.
Oh, it's a wonderful question. Well, first of all, I founded Mobius with my sister, Erica Ariel Fox. So in some ways, our destinies and contributions to the world are very entwined. Erica's a longtime lecturer at Harvard Law School and a protege of Roger Fisher's at their program on negotiation. So Erica brought into our joint work a deep ethical commitment to reducing the level of violence and polarization in the world. I came in through two different doors in my work before we joined. One was I had the privilege of spending a decade at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine in New York in the late 80s and the early 90s. And in that process had the honor to work with the Dean of the Cathedral, James Parks Morton, Paul Gorman, Carl Sagan, and then Senator Gore, to try to catalyze a religious response to the climate crisis, which was also a lot about connecting across seeming boundaries of irreconcilable difference, scientists and religious leaders within the religious community, everything from evangelical Christians to Orthodox Jews and everything in between, in a dialogue on behalf of what is no doubt the issue of our time. Trying to restore climate ecological sustainability. So that was a very big pillar. And I also, because you asked a personal question, I also, around that time, I was then in my early 20s, started to turn my attention and my time and effort towards repairing what had been hurt in my early life. I came from a very traumatized family generations back, as many of us do. And it hit me in the nose in my early 20s with lots and lots of symptoms in my life, relationally, somatically, psychologically. And it was an enormous grace because it set me on a path of inner development that I've walked now for 40 years, and that I think enables me to meet people in their pain and in their fracture with not only compassion, but a kind of resonance and attunement that one wouldn't have if one hadn't done their own long walk of healing. And my path has included psychotherapeutic resources. It's included lots and lots of years of body work, and using different technology to access different body memories. And in the last 15 years in particular, I've had the great joy of traveling with some mystical teachers, Thomas Hubel, Patrick Connor, Linda Tessera, Shai Tubali, and I've been hugely influenced by a transpersonal practices in addition to the kind of shadow work and healing work I was already doing.
Amazing. Amazing. I'm imagining you sort of almost like an enchilada being morphed and kneaded by all these different experiences. And thank you for sharing about the universality of our traumas, of the different things that we carry with and that cause fracture. Can you describe to us maybe an experience of where you feel or felt fractured, and maybe even today where you feel fractured, and how you move through that? Because I think
Sure.
that's something that's for the listeners really good to hear. It's for me good to hear. Hey, you're a fellow traveler. It's like, hey, Amy, how do you do it?
Yeah. And there are many. I think one of the humbling things about a healing journey is that it's long. It takes time to unwind some of these habits and some of the belief systems that become compensations from something that was too hard to handle in the moment. For me, it's been a long journey from numbness to actually feeling my body, to meeting people with openness and trust versus guardedness and self-protection. It's been a long journey to look at life for the full blessing that it is, and with the optimism that life is happening for me and not to me. That's taken a lot of refinement. A recent fracture, let me just give me a second. I want to give a good example. I mean, I could say honestly, sometimes a layer comes up for attention just out of the blue. And for the last 4 nights, for no external reason, I've woken up at 4 a.m. with a very acute anxiety attack. Not in a clinical sense, but just really agitated and really frightened. And so I'm just listening quietly throughout the day, trying to see if it will reveal itself to me what it's about. But I find that often a layer surfaces and I get it more in affect before I get it in memory, or before I can connect it to exactly what it's trying to show me. So it's sort of like an onion that you have to look at layers. I mean, I can get triggered by many things. I get triggered by exhaustion. I get very triggered by people being angry with me or upset with me, because one of the things that was difficult in my childhood is there was a lot of anger expressed in my family. And so it's still very agitating to me when somebody there's a breakdown. I don't do conflict well at all. Yeah, it could be many things. If Mobius is suddenly in a tight cash flow moment, I worry about all the people I'm responsible for and responsible to, and I can get worried about that. Yeah.
I love your vulnerability and how you shared about the 4 a.m. moment. I'm privy to those as well. And I love the lucidity with which you speak about that, the sense of, okay, that happens and it's like an onion. And then I love the practice of noticing during the day, it's like, what's being revealed now?
Yeah.
Whereas it would be a very different reaction to say, I'm going to take some medication or something so I don't have to feel this anymore, the numbing. So I really hear in you that willingness to open. So tell us about that. How have you made that journey into being willing to open? Because that, speaking from my own experience, like there's some areas of my life, like panic attacks, I have those too. Man, in those moments, it's like, no, beam me up, Scotty. I don't want to be here.
Yeah.
I know the other side. What's going on? Why are we here?
Yeah.
How do you
I guess a couple of things to say. I first of all want to say I don't have anything but appropriate respect for anybody who feels the need to take medication to handle what's arising for them. I think there was certainly a time in my life, I lost both my parents in the same year. And it was a very difficult year. It was very complex psychologically. And I took medication as a way to handle all the work with the estate and all the emotions that were arising. And so I think that's a perfectly appropriate thing to do when you need it. But I also think each of us has the opportunity, maybe I would say not the obligation, but the opportunity to cultivate practices that give us space outside of witnessing awareness, outside of what's eruptive and disruptive, so that we can more and more have, exactly to your beautiful name of the podcast, ground or centeredness, or the capacity to host ourselves. And I think one of the things that a healing journey gives you is a wider and wider cradle in which your own emotions can arise. And for many years, I thought the goal of my healing journey was to try to get rid of the terror, or get over the terror, or get to some destination where there was going to be perfect peace. That just is not my experience. My experience is that what happens is that more and more of you can accompany the tenderest parts of you when they come forward, and can help them calm down, can help regulate your nervous system, can co-regulate with other people when you can't do it for yourself. You build a tribe around you of people, of teachers, of practitioners who are good at helping you handle it when it's sort of above the water level of your capacity, whatever that is. I've been extremely fortunate, as I said, to have teachers and healers walk with me. And so a lot of it now I really can host and investigate and accompany on my own. And when I get to a certain point where it feels overwhelming to me, I ask for help. And I think that's everybody's right, is to not to walk this stuff alone. We all need help. It does take a village. That's why Eric and I built a community as part of our company. And that's also why we try with business leaders that we work with to build those kinds of nests and affinity groups and places where people can have candid conversation about what's really happening for them, even inside the workplace. I sometimes refer to that, Hylke, as corporate intimacy. Mm-hmm. And because there's such a legacy of untreated trauma, and everyone that I've met in my leadership programs, thousands of executives are walking around with some of the aftermath of what they and their ancestors lived through. It really is a universal need, I believe.
Beautiful. I want to acknowledge something that you said about medication, because you taught me something. You actually hit a little traumatic thing in my brain, because I made something a little bit less. And you just put it on an equal playing field. So I really appreciate that. It was a good moment to like, oh, interesting, good awareness. That's good. Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah. And that makes that paradoxically loosens the resistance to any of it, and also the sense of aloneness. I have to power through this. And I see from your story very much this idea of building a bigger container, however you do it, almost like an artist, with peers, with colleagues, with greater capacity within yourself. Almost doesn't matter, teachers, whatever it takes, make a bigger container.
It's so important what you said. Like, part of the aftermath of trauma is feeling like you have to power through. And also often trauma is accompanied by a lot of shame. And so it's very easy for us to be judgmental that we should be somewhere else, or some issue should be already resolved. And that's a way in which we are re-traumatizing ourselves. And I think Thomas Hübl says something so beautiful. He says, we're walking forever, and therefore I have time for now. I have time for now. And when you take that orientation to a healing process, there's no hurry. There's no should. You are where you are today, and you need the support that you need now, and it can be different, and it can be lighter over time. I really believe that. I believe everything can be healed.
Love that. I'm curious, back when you were in your 20s, St. John the Divine, that experience. Tell us about what kept you going, because I sensed that you came with a good backpack of stuff from the past, like many of us. Maybe a difference with you is you have acknowledged it. And so what kept you going? What was that thing that kept you going? or is there such a thing?
Oh, sure. I think maybe two things. I think that, like many of us, I had a sense of a calling, a sense of a desire to serve life. And very early in the period that I was at the cathedral, I had the privilege to encounter an Indian saint named Neem Karoli Baba. And he had as his core teaching a mantra that said, love, serve, and remember. And that became a kind of anchor for me, an orientation, a kind of compass of what I wanted to dedicate my life to opening my heart as wide as it is possible in a human lifetime, to have your heart be open, to make my life a life of service, a life of providing light and comfort and solace and alignment, greater alignment in the sense of social justice and the climate crisis. And to remember the divine and the blessing field all the time. And I think the marriage of psychological healing and spiritual elevation and expansion and ecstasy was the fuel that let me keep going. And worthy work. I think that's the trifecta that really sustains me and sustains me now.
I love that. Love, serve, and remember. And I appreciated how you gave shape to that remember part.
Mm.
I don't remember exactly the words. It's something around the divine field or the blessing or the
Blessing
support.
Yeah.
The blessing field. Oh, I like that. The blessing field. The blessing field. And being able to remember that. So how do you remind yourself
Mm.
of that blessing field? And as you think about that, what comes up for me is one thing I like to do is go in nature and just walk, feel the earth. And that reminds me, and somehow my blender between my ears does not tune into that. It's hard to tune that up here, this
Yes.
part for me still
Yes.
to remembering. So how do you remember?
Yeah, it's beautiful what you said. And you really, there's two implications in what you're saying. The natural environment is an immediate remember bell to our multisensory, dazzlement with life. And also how physical, like if you're moving and the wind is in your face and the flowers are smelling or the ocean is sounding, like we can remember through our sensory joy. And I do that absolutely in nature. I do that through cooking and through dining. I do that through beautiful, intimate conversations with friends like this one. I do that through travel and going to new places and meeting new worlds and cultures. I do that through witness and protest about things that I feel need to be called out and need to be named. I write poetry, which is a huge source of remembering for me. I chant the divine name every day for at least 30 minutes for 40 years, which is always, the mantra does exactly what you're describing, Hylke. It kind of quiets the monkey mind and brings you back into a frequency or vibration where love is available and love is omnipresent, and God is very close and proximate. And that sense of communion, I find, just, I don't know, it still gives me tingles. It thrills my heart.
And the way you describe it brings that in for me. So thank you for sharing that. You mentioned as in part of serve, so love, serve, and remember. And as part of serve, I hear you talk about justice work a few times. I'm curious about that. Like, how do you make that translation? And one question I have underneath that is, and how do you not get lost in the endless anger that one could have, that I sometimes seem to have about things happening in the world now? Like, how do you work with that?
Well, I've been an activist since my early 20s. So there's lots of different ways that I've chosen to express that, some more activist by opposition. So forms of protest, forms of civil disobedience, forms of coalition building. and sometimes by serving and supporting people who are doing a whole huge range of social change work. So, for example, in the early 90s, Robert Gass, Andre Carruthers, and I founded something called the Art of Leadership Program, which was sponsored by the Rockwood Fund and has taken thousands of NGO and nonprofit leaders through a leadership training program, where we were intending to bring the best practice that was being made available to corporate leaders and make it available to people who were going to devote their lives to the common good. So that would be an example. Another example that I'm allowed to talk about is that Mobius had a huge pro bono coaching program for the Obama campaign, and we were involved in coaching people in Chicago and everybody in the key battleground states. And that was, for me, a kind of fusion of the world of leadership development and the world of activism. I'm pretty constantly looking for places where Mobius can give away our services in the support of those who are on the front lines. So another example is a beautiful project that Thomas Hubel and Kyle Dietrich and I started when the USAID laid off thousands of their longtime workers. We gathered 3,000 coaches from around the world to volunteer to coach people who were being furloughed out of their jobs in their career transition and in the emotional distress that it was causing. And that project is still ongoing. So these days, my activism takes a slightly different expression than it did younger in my life, which is I'm just always looking for places where the resources that Mobius has or we have access to through our affiliations and partners to offer to people who are really making a difference. Another example is that Mobius and the Interdevelopment Goals organization this year are leading a one-year journey for people who are really committed to inner development and the merging of that inner development with work on sustainability. It's a wonderful question. If we had hours, I could probably fill hours because I think a great deal about what matters now to do and what's going to make a difference. Let me answer your other half of your question about anger. It's a little bit like I answered the question earlier. I think anger is a perfectly appropriate response to the painful things that are happening now. We're living, excuse me.
Please. Thank you for sharing.
In a time of rising fascism and cruelty and war, and anybody whose heart isn't breaking ought to ask themselves, why not? And if that heartbreak expresses itself as righteous indignation or fear or apathy or overwhelm or one of 100 different responses, I would say bless them all. They're all appropriate. It's a time I've never seen a time like this in the world in my lifetime. And I certainly wouldn't say that I necessarily know what the skillful means of response are, but I would say that it feels important to me not to join the polarization that's breaking us down and separating us from each other, and to look as much as possible from a unitive mind that believes in the inherent goodness of life and is looking for places for restoration and repair rather than division and stuckness. I'd say that.
That combination of a seeming contrast between righteous indignation and unity mind, that I would like to explore more, because I think that is such an important alchemy point to look at, and also something that I personally am standing at the beginning of. I find myself always at the beginning of that. Like, how the heck does that work? And so we're going to take a short break. After the break, we're going to explore more. We've been listening already to Amy's beautiful story. Some of the things I'm taking away are this like tremendous welcome to everything, and this commitment to opening the heart to being a vessel of love, not by herself, but with this community, which is not the thought. It is actually reality, in this reality that we live, between all these different vessels, like corporations, nonprofits, politics, in her dining room. So I'm looking forward to sitting more in this experience of opening and exploring what's possible when we commit to our connectedness. See you after the break.
Well,
you are listening to Rooted and Unwavering, presented by Growth Leaders Network, the leadership, team, and culture development company. If you would like to learn more about working on connectedness for yourself, your team, or organization, please contact Growth Leaders Network on LinkedIn. And now, back to the show.
So welcome back, Rooted and Unwavering, broadcasting live, actually from Massachusetts and Arizona. So it's interesting these days how we can be together this way. So if you're listening, maybe sit with that. How could your heart not break in current times? And what may be keeping you from holding that heartbreak to happen, from that happening? So Amy, tell us more about this alchemy between righteous indignation and unity mind. How?
I think the answer is to recognize that you can look at what is happening externally from multiple states of consciousness. So if you're looking from the relative state of consciousness, how does human interaction going? How are we faring on the planet? How are we dealing with each other? Then your heart's response is going to be one of compassion, one of concern, one of care, and one, certainly one of anger, I have moments where I really feel devastated by what's unfolding. And that is true. That's not, there's nothing I'm going to now continue to say that will mitigate the truth of that. That's true. And there is a state of consciousness that I have been privileged to touch on. It's not a sustained state in me, but I have touched it. Where one can feel the deeper multi-lifetime journey that all of us as souls are undertaking, and where any given narrative in a given moment suddenly becomes more fluid and looks like part of a much wider story, a journey of learning, a journey of healing, a journey of evolution. You stop taking everything quite so personally. And in that expanded state, or in that unitive mind, you recognize that at an essential level, at a soul level, nothing that ever happened to you has actually hurt you. The innermost eternal flame in our hearts is fully intact, fully unwavering, to use your other beautiful word. And the things that the relative mind might get caught in, or activated by, or engaged with, start to dissolve in their importance, start to soften in their potency, start to occur, I think, in a wise understanding of the nature of the human journey and the nature of the soul's journey. And those are both an absolute and a relative truth that sit side by side in me, at least. I do find comfort in, at least when I think about my life. I can only speak for myself, but I'm quite certain that the things that were hard in my life propelled me to become who I became, to gift life what I gave. And I would gladly do it all again if it resulted in my being equipped to serve in the way that I'm currently serving. So I think there's a kind of, one step is to just reconcile and bow down to the way life showed up for you, and to come into a deep peace and acceptance, and even a reverence for however your life unfolded. That I think is a spiritual turning towards reconciliation with the divine that we all have to do in our lifetimes. Maybe it happens on your deathbed, maybe it happens in the afterlife, but I do think each of us is on a karmic journey, and each of us is in a process of maturing as souls. And so one step in that maturity is to say, Thomas Hubel said this to me early on in our relationship, and it was very beautiful. Just bow down to wherever God sends you. So I think that's part of it. The second thing I would say is that main obstacles to a state of unity turn out, ironically, not to be struggles with what's happening out there and the parts of life that you find challenging to reconcile or embrace. It's mostly an inner game. The love gap is, what parts of me have I not turned towards? What parts of me do I not accept? What parts of me am I still in struggle with? And when you start to close that love gap, then what's happening out here all of a sudden does occur differently. It does appear differently.
That last thing you said, like closing the love gap, what I almost heard is that, here's how you see that. It's almost like where the absolute understanding in you or the feeling state in you, or that knowing, meets that relative, and they start to come together, they conjoin, they start to become this alchemy in each other. And then the paradox of, yes, I am really angry right now, and I can hold that part in me without changing it, from that place of love. And of course, we're putting words on something that cannot be described. That's a little bit how I hear what you're saying.
Yes, and it's both embracing the emotions that arise, but it's also embracing the shadow that you're rejecting. So, for example, I might say, I struggle with the expressions of hatred that we see in society right now, and I could list them, but I won't. I will struggle with that outside until I own and acknowledge the level of hatred that runs in me.
Yes, yes.
Which is different than just hosting an emotion. It's like really understanding it's our pain, it's our hatred, it's our division, it's our helplessness, it's our everything that is out there is also in me.
Yeah.
And my teacher, Patrick Connor, this is one of his core teachings that has slowly, I came to it with resistance, if I'm honest, Hylke, because it's hard to hold the relative and absolute perspectives equally passionately and equally as equal truths. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that. I'm sitting with what you are saying, and maybe as the listeners sit what we're saying and what you're saying, and I'm hearing also in you very much a journey of, and this is my journey in this, and how I'm bowing down to this moment in my life, and these are the tools that I'm finding in that. So that's that's what I'm sensing is the invitation for us as listeners.
I guess I would say one other thing, since we're talking about activism and spirituality. I had the great privilege to go to the Obama Presidential Library a couple of weeks ago because they invited people that had worked on the campaign to come. And it's extraordinary. Everyone should go as soon as possible. May it be a haven of inspiration for all of us. But one of the things they did that I really cherished is that they archived meaningfully the civil rights movement, the women's rights movement, the farm workers movement, the union movement, all the African-American contributions to culture and the interfaith dialogue that was the Obama White House, and et cetera. Excuse me.
Bless you, yes. Yeah.
And I was very struck as I watched footage of some of the visionary leaders of the people's progressive movements of the last 100 years, maybe longer, how interwoven faith and community and the quality of love on which they were attempting to create a more just and inclusive society in each in their own lane. It was a spiritual work. It wasn't just an activist work. It was activism by spirit every time, and love in action. So it just reminded me that while we talk about these as separate streams, social activism, psychology, spiritual development, they're one movement, they're one river.
Thank you. Activism is love in action.
Yeah.
That being the foundation from which it happens.
Yes.
Or it can happen.
At its best, that's how it happens.
That's how it happens. Thank you. Is your book Leading in Chaos co-authored also an activism act in some way? How does that come about?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think for Nicholas and I, we were responding to the urgency of this time. My friend Bayo Akumulafe has one of the best sayings about this time. He says, "The times are urgent. We must slow down." And I think there's great wisdom in that. But Nicholas and I were absolutely responding to all the polycrisis dimensions that we've been touching on already, and feeling an urgent need with the leaders we work with in the public and private sector to try to help people diagnose all the contributing factors to what we're seeing as a kaleidoscope moment of great chaos and churn and adaptive demand on the one hand, and on the other hand, to talk about the pillars of healing and awakening as resources, as manna in the desert, as nourishment for people who might be feeling overwhelmed or disoriented or uncertain or shaky. The book is written in very small chapters, sort of 3-page chapters. So it's very postmodern in its friendliness to very busy people, but it's intended to be potent homeopathic medicine to the level of despair one might have at this time. And they're short chapters because we tell deep truths. It's a very raw book. It's a book that conveys the trauma work we do with corporate leaders. It's a book that talks about the dimensionality and complexity of a true spiritual path. It's a book that talks about the grit and churn of a deep healing path. So we wanted to give people chapters to really read and then contemplate and metabolize slowly. It's not a book to read, in one sitting by any means. It's almost like little doses of, we hope, provocations and, to use your word, alchemy.
Provocations. I'm imagining those chapters being like workshop modules almost. In a way.
lot of them do describe exactly different modules that we do in our programs, absolutely. And the modules, again, are also designed to wake people up, to take them out of their comfort zone, to take people out of the numbness that they're walking around in order to cope with modern culture. In particular, I think for both of us, we're trying to hack the degree to which corporate culture is built on a disembodied way of working. We're exhausting people past their physical and mental limits. It's a very unrelational model. The leaders we work with have no relational vocabulary for how to reveal themselves, how to receive and deeply listen and attune to another, and how to get support. I mean, they know how to ask for collaborative problem solving, but they wouldn't necessarily know to say to somebody, would you just sit with me? Would you share a piece of your wisdom with me? Would you cook for me because I'm tired? Would you hold me because I need to cry? This language that comes, I think, to many of us comfortably has been antithetical to the corporate culture that we've built. And it's also anti-spirit. There's very little conversation in corporate boardrooms or in top teams about deep purpose, how to contribute, how to care for the commons, how to tend to the people who work for them. We've lost all the vitality and richness that we could be inviting back as we reimagine the future of work as love.
Imagine the future of work as love. What is one of your favorite practices from leading in chaos that you use yourself?
Oh, I use a lot of them, but I'll tell you my favorite one to talk about right now because it dovetails to what I was just saying. We've been encouraging organizations to create nests. So you join a team or you join a function and you join a division, but when you join a company, you also get assigned to a nest. And a nest is a small group that's drawn from all different facets of the organization that meets every month. And the only purpose of the nest is emotional support. So you web into the fabric of the organization the structure of built-in community. And for as long as you're part of that organization, that group is there in solidarity, in mutual generosity, with free attention, and hopefully with acts of kindness, so that nobody has to walk through putting their parent in a nursing home or getting their special needs child into a school or grieving an illness by themselves. It's just an unnatural and untenable way to go through daily life in isolation. So a nest is just sort of an acknowledgement that we belong to one another. Another example is that we've been encouraging in the book that when people constitute a team, the team spends the first day of its life cycle sharing life stories, starting 2 generations back. Because when you hear people's stories, particularly their lineage story, you get to honor and sort of acknowledge the incredible resilience of the human spirit. In every story, there's incredible adversity, trauma, challenge. And you also get to know, therefore, what might be their points of vulnerability and reactivity. And you can work together in a soothing way, in a way that's coherent with the reality that people walk in the door with a lot of pain. And they also walk in with extraordinary strength and gifts. And a team that takes that time to really intimately know each other, I believe, will be capable of real psychological safety, real trust that we know are the antecedents to innovation, creativity, high performance, all of that.
On this quiet nest and spending time together as a team to acknowledge where we came from, our relations and our journey, our darkness, our resilience as a grounding force of seeing each other. I love it. I'm gonna read this book and use it in my work. I love it. Leading in Chaos. I love that.
Thank you.
Now, yeah, I love it. I also like that you used the word provocative, because the other thought in my head was, you've been at this for a while.
Yeah.
And some of what you're talking about, no, most of what you're talking about is antithetical to mainstream corporate culture. And there was a time, maybe a few years ago, when it was becoming a little bit more mainstream. I'm sensing we might be drifting away a little bit again. I don't know quite how to describe that yet. But definitely when you got started, I remember when I got started with meditation, which is about 20 years ago, that was very weird. Now it's kind of mainstream. So when you took that plunge, this was super weird. So how did you do that, Amy, and not lose your shirt and your financial security and all these things that people might be worried about? Even now, thinking about, no, I'm not going to make a nest in my company. People are going to think I'm crazy.
I would say a couple of things, Hylke. One, everybody finds it dazzling to think that you could do this kind of transformational healing work in a corporate setting. And I've taken thousands of leaders through a program. Like, we have this projection on corporate executives as if they're not also sons and daughters, immigrants, trauma survivors, kids who got sent too early to boarding school, kids whose parents had alcoholism, kids who suffered from racial bullying, kids. I mean, all this is also true. They have their same stories as we all do. And when you make an invitation that's genuinely safe, skillful, and offers them a chance to look in the rooms of their house that they've been running from and integrate what happened to them and free them up, liberate their energy to be so much more of who they are, nobody says no to that. We long to be in touch with our deepest selves. We long to be able to lay to rest the things that haunt and happen to us. We long to accompany each other. You don't have to teach executives how to support each other in that process. The minute the group makes a commitment to really dive deep and go for it, everybody instantaneously offers their support and emotional care to each other. So I just think one of the things that happened early on to me is that I stopped caring if I was going to be weird. I think I knew all my life I was going to be weird. And I also refused to see people through a lens of their persona or their defenses. When somebody walks into one of my workshops, I see them for who they're going to be on Friday after they've taken the journey. And even though when I talk to them on Sunday night, maybe they seem walled off or formal or distant from themselves or exhausted, they seem all those things, I'm already knowing the gratitude and the profundity of what can happen in the week and where they're going to respond from on Friday. And I have the joy now of having taken people through the experience so many times that comes very easily. But you're right. In the beginning, it felt more risky. In the beginning, it felt more edgy. And in the beginning, I think it was bold and, even a little audacious to do this kind of work. And I am deeply grateful for the colleagues that took a chance on joining me in Erica in this process, and more so for the clients that said yes early on when it was really an avant-garde yes, and it was really, in some sense, a bold visionary commitment that this was possible. And I think it is still. I think it's still at the cutting edge of what's happening, but I feel great conviction that there's no other way.
I feel great conviction there is no other way. I have to ask, tell me more about that.
If you read thousands of trauma screenings over 20 years, as I said earlier, you just see how many of the pain points in society are being driven by unhealed trauma. We're all walking around and making choices from a regressed and wounded perspective. And until we stop and turn towards that and really address it at its root, we're going to continue to make choices that are antithetical to life, that are harmful to each other, and that are coming out of a numb and terrified place. When you can take a group of people and ask them to really look, what are the fears you walk with? What are the contractions you walk with? What are the ways you keep life distant from you? What are the ways you're not paying attention to the people closest to you? These are many important questions that are ethical questions. They're questions of aligning to the meridian of life. I think the only way to unwind the things that we might otherwise treat with activism, if we want to not just keep addressing the symptoms, but actually change and make the future generations freed of this legacy, we have to be the generation that does the hard work. I just think it's true.
Thank you for that. I remember you thinking about the people come in Sunday evening, and then you can see their Friday morning. You can see their Friday. So they're on Sunday. They're at the edge of discovery in a way, right? And which we all are always. And I love what you said in this podcast about walking forever. So how would you describe the edge that Amy is on today?
Well, I am currently working on another level of my embodiment. So it's pretty easy for me to be ecstatic and soaring. And I feel that when I cook, I feel that when I dance, I feel that when I sing. I've lots and lots of sources of elevation. It's been a 40-year journey to try to really come home to myself. So right at this moment, I'm trying a new nutrition routine. I'm trying to get to the gym much more regularly, which is hard when you travel and you're exhausted. And I'm grappling with all the layers of emotion that live in the tissues and cells of my body that have been using lethargy and kind of dormancy as a numbing mechanism. So my cutting edge is I'm coming home, I hope.
Coming home more and more into the body. I love that vulnerability. We're getting towards our final minutes. This time has flown for me. What would you say to somebody who sits in that Sunday evening, but is not at the beginning of a workshop, right? Is not in that nest or support environment, that out there by themselves, trying to keep their job. Many people are in that state right now, like trying to keep my job. Prices are going up. I have bills up the wazoo. This sounds really nice. Great that you guys can do it. Where do we start? What would you say to a person that's curious and feels that regressive mind, trauma brain becoming visible, and also the ecstasy and the longing? What would you say to a person like that? Where to start?
I mean, first of all, just to acknowledge what you said, Hylke, which is when people feel a threat existentially, like they are not sure they're going to have money for food or able to support their family or keep their home. spiritual development is a luxury at that point. And I would just honor that. If that's somebody's reality, then the first priority is, of course, doing everything they can to secure their family. And even in that context, I would say a few minutes of rest and respite, a few minutes of meditation, a few minutes of a friend holding your hand can make a big difference. So in any context, I think we're walking too alone, and help is right outside your door. There are many people who would be privileged to support you emotionally and spiritually, and especially if it's a very hard moment for you, get help is the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is that the resources of the poetics, poetry, music, a museum, nature, as you said earlier, like, make sure you continue to fuel what inspires you, because it's going to be a long, hard road for all of us, I think, in the years ahead. I think this is a dark time. And we have to plant seeds of hope as aggressively and consciously and intentionally as we can. And we have to harbor each other in the interim.
Beautiful. So we walk too alone. So go across your fence, open the door, and ask for help. People will be privileged to help you.
Yes.
And thank you for that. And also be intentional about the resources that you do have, the nature, the museum, the book, the poetry, the cooking, the music, whatever it might be.
Yes.
Take that. At the end, what I want to say, huge bow of gratitude, lots of insights, things that are probably going to stick with me for many decades from this conversation is inclusion of everything, including medication. That was very important for me to hear today. Also, this love, serve, and remember, and the blessing field, and making that an active priority. And this integration of these endless layers of walking to forever and walking together forever.
Yes.
And then the alchemy that happens when we are together. And this sense of, I'm sensing part of me is always at Sunday evening. If I can just remember, Friday is just a couple of days away. What would you like to say by way of closing, Amy?
Well, first of all, just thank you for the quality of your listening. It's stunning what you gathered from what we shared, and it's a beautiful recap. And maybe I would just end by saying, I really do feel very hopeful about the human spirit and the possibility of a renaissance coming from this darkness. And I'm grateful to have had this conversation to offer anybody a little glimmer of that light if we did. Yeah.
Rebirth it is. I'm signing up for that, Amy. Thank you so much for being a rebirthing doula for many people, including myself. If you like this kind of thinking, you can find Amy Elizabeth Fox on LinkedIn. You can find Mobius Executive Leadership. You can find Leading in Chaos. Remember, 3-page chapters. I love that idea. Sit with those and let those nourish you, also in those moments. And then, of course, if you like this kind of thinking about being rooted and unwavering, listen to all these beautiful stories. You can connect to Rooted and Unwavering anywhere where you listen to podcasts, like Apple, Spotify, doesn't matter. And for now, I invite each of us to maybe take a moment and to appreciate maybe the little rebirths that might be happening right now, today, this week, and how we often walk too alone. I definitely do. Thank you for listening. This is Rooted and Unwavering. Thank you again, Amy, for being here today.
My joy.
And see you next time at Rooted and Unwavering. I'm your host, Hylke Faber. See you next time.
Thank you for joining us in today's episode of Rooted and Unwavering, leadership conversations about courageous connectedness, presented by the leadership development company, Growth Leaders Network. To learn more, subscribe to this podcast, connect with Growth Leaders Network and Hylke Faber on LinkedIn, or read Hylke's award-winning book, Taming Your Crocodiles. Now take a moment and appreciate something that is great about you. Celebrate the gift that you are and enjoy connecting more deeply to your best self today. See you next time on Rooted and Unwavering.